Welcome to the Happy Wealthy Show. I'm your host, Neal Phalora. And today I have somebody, like most of my guests, that I have a deep relationship with. And I also feel very deeply about this guy. His name is Jamie Miller. But what you should know about him is when I introduced him on stage, kind of called him the Harry Potter of communication because he really is a communication wizard. And it's that kind of knowledge and understanding that when you start to hear about it, you're like, I realize that I'm not being a better human being, not in a bad way, but in a way like I'm not being more of just a real human and understanding how humans communicate, what they want, what they need, and how to turn that into actionable things and also revenue. This is the kind of guy who's speaking at the Pentagon, who's coaching Salesforce of Inc. 500 companies and giving them a completely new way of thinking and feeling about communication. But also, guys, as you always know, it's not just about the business or the Benjamins. It's also about how we can live a better quality of life. So it's my absolute pleasure to hear the wonderful English accent that we're going to hear in the next 40-ish minutes of Mr. Jamie Miller and all his wisdom. Thank you for being on the show, Jamie. Welcome.
Cheers for having me.
Yes,
I
yes.
appreciate all that edification from you just there, man.
You're welcome. So you're one of those guys that it's hard to quantify exactly what you do because you're really multifaceted, right? But maybe if you could give us like 60 to 90 seconds, how would you describe who Jamie Miller is and what you do for people?
Okay, if I was practicing what I preach, I would throw a question back at you, Nia,
Yes.
right now, as you know, all right, and be like, well, what do you think your audience would want to hear? Because then I get to share specifically. In a nutshell, I would just say I'm someone who had an epiphany at 42 years of age, all right, that I had the sleepless nights and someone who could go off by themselves and teach them a skill set they had studied for 2 decades plus, and then basically build my own brand around it. And they can tell I've got an accent. Yes, you said I'm not originally from here, and I'm just someone who takes advantage in the nicest way of the opportunities that exist in this great country. And again, I've been able to do some of what I'm doing abroad, which is lovely. But for your viewer's standpoint, you talked about happiness, and I like the word peace, and I find that I'm really happy because of the peace that I've created. But who I am is hopefully just someone that people can align with, Neo, and my I don't have a mission statement or a business plan written specifically anywhere, but I live a mission of if I can leave everyone feeling better off than they found me, that's who Jamie Miller is. And
Yes. Yeah, and that's wonderful. And that's what you said is just a hallmark of who you are as a person. And I think probably to some degree that might chap some people's asses, because you do have a certain relax and flowness, right? That I also feel like is really helpful to live a more fulfilled life, a better quality of life, right? So, one of the things that I think is really, I love this story, and so I'm just going to prompt you a little bit. And in a podcast where I like to be organic, I am going to prompt you a little bit. Um, Tell us the story about your kids eating broccoli.
okay, so you've seen me on the stage, all right?
Yes.
Okay, so I teach what's called the wax on, wax off method. I call it of teaching communication. So when Daniel-san's learning wax on, wax off from Mr. Miyagi, he's like, "What's that got to do with karate?" And it ends up being everything to do with karate. So I use the example of getting my kids to eat broccoli is the same verbiage that someone would use to get a client for whatever business they're running. And so an example, since you brought it up, is most parents are not conscious in the questions that they're asking their kids. And again, the way I coach people is not to say my way is the right way. It's just a kind of clarity coach. Like it, and you bring up the vegetables, broccoli. If parents are asking not so great conscious questions in their family life and home life, my belief is they can't suddenly become amazing at communication in their professional life. The two,
Yes.
okay. So,
Yes.
so hopefully your audience will go along with this. Most parents with the broccoli, the kid will say, "I don't want to eat the broccoli," and the parents will say, "Well, how do you know you don't like it?" And the kid will just say, "I just know." And then a parent might ask, "Have you ever tried it?" And the kid's going to say, "No." the parents are no close to their kids eating broccoli. That's not an agreement. And if I can teach your audience the way the all the sale is do we agree to think around something the same way? And there are better questions. So I would turn around to my kids at the time and I'd be like, hey, kids, do you think I feed you healthy because I do or don't care about you? As a question. And I use multiple choice on purpose because it's a psychology way to steer a conversation. There's no better way than multiple choice. So the kids will say, you feed us healthy because you care about us. I'm like, okay. Well, in that light, then, what benefits would you come up with for at least trying the broccoli? And my kids might say, I don't know. And then I'll say, and it might end up talking here. I'll go, Alexa, what are the benefits of eating broccoli? And then the Alexa will go, because they won't listen to me, but they'll listen to Alexa going off about the benefits. And it will go off about like da 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 and something about the brain and something about this. And then I'll ask my kids, did any one of those things? Because everyone, if people knew this, everyone when you're selling to a client, your client will buy something based on one thing that they value a lot. So I said, like, Ruby, did any one thing stand out to you? And my daughter will say, the thing about the brain, Dad. And then I'll just subtly throw out, well, why is that important? And now my daughter is telling me and going off on a tangent why having a great brain matters. And then I'll say, well, what are your thoughts now? She'll go, I think I should at least try it. And I say, I agree with you. So, okay. And just to make it for the business people, financial advisors or realtors, for example, will get told, I'm going to hold off. I think the market's going to crash. Or I want to sell everything because I think the market's going to crash. It happens in both those industries, as an example. The question they're asking is, why do you think it's going to crash? Is the same as them asking, have you ever tried it? And your kid going, no. All right, you're asking a question you don't want the answer to. If you're not being conscious. Because if you ask someone like, or someone says, I think you're expensive, and you ask, why do you think I'm expensive? You're not going to like their response, and you're going to end up having a battle. So, an example, a better question, like, hey, we think we're going to hold off. We think the market's going to crash. As a realtor, I would go with multiple choice. Hey, just real quick, do you think you've got really bad taste or good taste in property? And they're going to say good taste, and you'll be like, okay. So if the market crashes and you've got good taste, right? Do you think you're going to have more or less chance of getting the property that you actually want? And they'll say less chance. And do you see where I'm going? So it's basically the caliber of the questions that we ask in the situations we face, determine the outcome that we're going to have. So hopefully your audience like the broccoli
Yeah, yeah,
scenario
I
the way
do.
that you do.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that I think why I so why we had magnetism for each other. And when I heard your message, it's this idea of just radical empathy, right? It's like, it's not just, can I sell them something? It's like, can I really understand what the person in front of me is going through? What are they worried about? What are they up against? And what does it take for them to win? And in the radical empathy framework, it's just like, it's basic skills. And I think this is why you are such a light for so many people. It's staying curious, deeply curious, way longer than most people are willing to do. And what that fundamentally means for those of you listening is that you've got to take yourself out of the equation in a way that most people aren't willing. That you want to sell, you're looking for. I've done it, Jamie. I've done it. I still occasionally lapse into it here and there, but I'm looking for that in, right? It's not about being curious way longer and really teasing it out in a way that your client owns everything that they say. We want to own it by guiding them, like, oh, I heard them say that word and now it's going to trigger me for my script and my verbatim and the things that I say, and now I'm going to have it in to tell them about me and a customer that I coached. That's not, but you don't get any ownership on the client side when you speak for them. And I think that's where you excel, is that you help people say the things honestly that most line and logic of reasoning doesn't let people say, right? You never really get to the bottom of what they're thinking and how they're feeling.
A couple of things you unearthed there. One is there is no script. There's a framework to conversations that we have. I don't. Look, there are people out there who believe in scripts. I'm not one of them. Like, I'm not a big fan of AI from the standpoint of I won't use it because I like the idea of whatever correspondence I have through phone, email. when they see me in person, they're getting the same exact person. People can. I'm not saying AI is bad. I'm just saying that it's a different. I believe in more that the more AI comes out and the more that devices are around, the more that I am going to excel for the face to face and being able to what the other thing you unearthed was what I call emotional intelligence. It's a capacity to ask questions, not make it about yourself. When people are starting their dialogue, let me tell you all about myself and let me tell you about all the experience. They don't even realize that they're just talking and talking, talking, and they're not extracting any value from the human being in front of them. That's not why someone's going to buy from you. Someone's going to buy from you if you can get them to an emotional state. The way you get to an emotional state is, you said be curious. I teach, my flavor is gathering information. I'm just going to gather so much information, and if I hear particular keywords that are like where someone goes wow or I love this, and then I know I have to elevate the emotion, not make it logic. Do you want, like, it? Too many people don't peel back the onion layer enough with the questions to get someone to an emotional state, and they might think people do things on logic. None of us in the world do it. Do anything on logic. We're not logical beings. We'll justify it with logic after the fact.
We're not. Neville Goddard, in one of his books, he called it um, think feelingly, right? I think that's the term he used. I always love that term, but it's so true. Even the way, Jamie, even the what we see is first passed through our thoughts, then our emotions, and then the brain sees it, right? So I tell clients this sometimes in that demonstration. I say, if you could see me, if you could see you from my eyes for 5 seconds, you would be a changed person for life, because what I'm seeing and what you're seeing are two completely different things. And think about that from your customer's perspective. If you're not staying with them long enough to see what they see and really understand it, like you said, at an emotional level, then you're missing out on the greatest opportunity to create lifetime value with that person. But I do think one of the things that stands in people's way is that people need to have a more intimate relationship with themselves and their emotions. People don't want to go to the emotional place, right? Because I even was on a call today, and this lady ended up asking me, she's like, how do I work with you? I never even offered to work with her, but I had created such an emotional, because I knew in a moment she needed something. And instead of going off a script, I asked her to do this exercise. I said, hey, if you had 90 seconds to yell out your front door and you needed to speak your truth to the world, everybody's listening, what are you going to tell them that you're about? And she gave me an answer, and it was, as you already know, it was kind of that. And I just looked at her and I said, tough love moment. I said, that's a very safe answer. Why don't you try again? And she said, I'm getting so emotional. I said, good. I said, good, right? And it was from that place, because I leaned into her in a way, not to sell her, but I'm like, don't give me bullshit right now. You're telling me you want X, stand the hell up and tell me that you want X. And you're going to tell the whole world, and you're going to give me this answer like, I want this and I want that. Sounds like a byline from some bad billboard. No.
I love. There's no fascination why we're aligned, Neil, and you like. So it's in, so I've been called a lot recently into the real estate industry because I don't know if you're aware, but there's this NAR thing going on. There's a lot of,
Yes.
okay. So
Yes.
I'll give you an example. What you said, it's the self talk that's important. All right, how we feel about ourselves, because I call it the wax on wax off moment of this is, I'll tell my girlfriend, I'll wake up next to us, Stephanie, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And it's in the morning when we're waking up, and she'll say, I think you need glasses. I am telling her something about herself that I believe that she was in my head looking at her through my eyes. She would see that she's beautiful. She'd feel differently about herself. But when we make statements consciously, if that's what we're doing, if the other person doesn't feel that way about themselves, it's an irrelevant statement. So you've got brokers, for example, or you've got bosses telling their teams or telling people something, this like NAR, this stuff is irrelevant. If you've got everyone in the room and they're leaving that meeting, Neo, and they're like, no, I think I'm going to struggle here. All right, to get, they're hearing from the boss. I think it's irrelevant, but if they don't believe it, it's an irrelevant conversation, Neo. And then we all have to have our self talk. When looking at me, the self talk that I have is kind of like just there is no, when I say there is no sale, I will sell to anyone at any given time. It's, I call it the hybrid model of a hunter and a farmer. You can plant seeds for future relationships. I don't reach out to you, yet we've built a relationship now that stems. It's step coming up to the over a year mark now, and it will be, in 5 years' time, we can connect. We build on our relationship. There's no hunter element where it's like, hey, Neo, do you want to become a client of mine? Do you know what I mean? Or can you see the benefits, right? There's never been that question, right? And that's what you did with your client, your potential client. You never said there's a sale. They're like, how do I get to work with you? That doesn't happen by accident. People will remember the way you leave them feeling. All right. And that's why it's so critical that, again, I'm thankful for having an existence that teaches people how to more consciously communicate, where you get to be your miscellaneous self. All right. If the people who watch this can understand, they can find happiness whereby they don't have to chase business, and they don't have to, they don't have to listen to what's going on in society, and they have the self-talk game really strong. I'm a self-confessed very naive entrepreneur. All right. And I have this on my phone. A client bought it for me where it says the word believe. I always teach the word believe is the
Oh
most
yeah,
powerful.
if you can't see what he's holding up here, he has the sort of Ted Lasso archetype sticker on the back of his phone that says "Believe." So go ahead.
The word believe is, I call it, the most powerful word on the planet. All right. You have to consciously use the word believe in external talk to bring on clients, but also your internal talk. My whole business, what you look at right now, and maybe I could have shared this beginning, is three questions I ask myself when I started my business. Do I believe in myself? Has to be an emphatic yes. Can I get someone else to believe I can help them? Has to be a yes. And then, can I get someone to place a high value on what I bring them? Has to be a yes. If your people who watch this can ask those three questions of themselves, then they externally ask someone, do you believe I can help you? And what kind of value do you, if you gathered the right information, got into an emotional state, what kind of value do you place on achieving those things that you are genuinely shouting to the rooftops, as you said, with the potential client? They're going to place a high value on that, and they're going to believe you can help them. It just makes your life more glorious. And the naive part comes to this: once I believe I can achieve something, it's game over. Once, all right, and we all have self limitations as entrepreneurs. If someone ever said they're uncapped in that scenario, they certainly didn't start out that way. I feel us as entrepreneurs, we all start out. We have to anti-program ourselves from the corporate environment, take that leap in the first place. So
Yeah, and those things just don't go away. That's the other thing that I see with my clients too. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, I was in that demeaning relationship for 17 years, and now I'm over that." I don't need people to be a bleeding heart and always be wounded. But what I can say for you reliably is each of those things will keep meeting you and greeting you in different seasons of your life. They just will. They don't go away. But the question for me, at least the way I see it, is can we develop a different relationship with those things instead of saying fuck them and cancel them, which that doesn't really work. The idea is like, I have fear, I have things that come up, but I've created a different relationship. I see limiting beliefs as not limiting but protecting. And when I understand they're doing their best job from their vantage point to do what they do, now I've created a different dialogue with fear and scarcity and all those things. And when they come up, I do the 3 to 5 minute work to, okay, what do I need to feel here? What do I need to process? How can I work with this part of me in a way, knowing no there are no bad parts and moving forward? But since you said this word believe, let's dive into that for a moment, right? Because you're a guy who puts a lot of belief in things. I mean, this is a guy, Jamie is a guy who's like, okay, this will be a $75,000 client. They say yes, I send them a smiley face. That's my contract, right?
right,
And I have, since meeting you, I have leaned into that energetic, and I'm just telling you, I have people who, even after they coach me, if they're on some kind of payment plans, I have 99.9% of people have paid me. Nobody has defaulted. Everybody has finished off. And that is a real statistic. But I leaned into that energetic. But there's something that I know you can share with our audience about, like, how do we get there, right? Because I think people can hear your story and they can kind of get their underwear in a bunch a little bit. Like, what do you mean you don't chase business? What do you mean you just send them a smiley face back for clients?
I'm again, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, as the British expression will go. But I love anti-programming. I guess I get a kick out of proving, like, we live in America, the most litigious country in the world, and I like to prove that you don't need to have signed agreements with people. I'll give you another one. The reason I'm wearing a hat All right. And why I started wearing a hat is I grew my hair out. If someone would have seen me talking in different stages, I almost had what I looked like a mullet. And that was all through proving to someone who said their appearance matters. I said, I'm going to prove to you it doesn't matter as much. And then last year was my year of learning price is irrelevant in the face of extracting value. Look, watch this. People spend, your audience will understand, especially those who've been to college or they understand what college costs today. When people go to college, they believe that when they get out of college, they're set up for life. And they'll invest hundreds of, way more than 75 grand. They'll go to a liberal arts college around the corner from where I'm sat right now and pay 300 grand to go to Rollins College. I know this because I went there. All right. Now, I had a soccer scholarship, granted, but let's say I didn't. There are people, individuals at that college who are going to pay off that student loan. So when it comes to bringing on clients, as long as you ask them what value do you place on having this in your life, if you've got them to the emotional space and they believe that you can help them, you might have to put them on a payment plan, but they will pay you. And I'll tell you, I love it. I can show you text messages from clients. Hey, I'm ready to pay you the next installment. I'm not asking them. They're just like, hey, Jamie, I'm ready to pay you the next amount and not chasing. And here's why: I'm proactive. The more proactive we are in our communication, the less reactive that we have to be. So here's how it's structured. When I bring them on, I'll be like, look, if you were me, and it's the greatest 4 words that your audience can learn. If you were me, no one wants to feel sold in life. But if you get them to be like, I would be doing the same exact thing, and this is not something I taught on stage, so this is something you're like, this is something your audience should like. No one wants to be sold.
Right.
If you can consciously get the other person in front of you, though, to feel like I would be doing the same exact thing if I was you right now, they won't feel sold. And it's down to 4 words that you consciously use: if you were me. All right. So in the event of payment plan, hey, if you were me, is it natural? You just don't want to chase people. And the right person's going to say, absolutely not. Okay, so can I hold you accountable that you'll just reach out to me on the schedule that you set with me right now? Yes. Great. Now I don't need to chase. All right, and I know that that might seem like, yeah, right. I've got the receipts, as they call it, to bring on clients where it started last year, 12 grand, then it went to 24 grand, then it went to 36 grand. Next year, true story. I said I'm trying to reach out to the pro athletes now. All right, why? They earn millions of dollars. I'm going to prove that I can get a client or 4 or 5 where they pay me $1 million a year based on the value that they place on communication and their ability to be better parents or better business people when they leave the league. They'll be able to connect those dots. It sometimes comes. I didn't invent the concept of go where you're valued. You can buy a bottle of water from a gas station for $1, and the same bottle in the airport is 5. So people are paying for the same exact thing elsewhere. I didn't create that scenario, Neo, but when you can internalize and understand that, as long as you ask the right questions of the person in front of you, price becomes irrelevant. And the fact that people will buy depreciating assets like a car or pay for college, you just have to get them to connect the dots sometimes with questions, not telling them these things. Did you go to college is different than, what do you mean it's expensive? You can go to college. Like, no. I'm not telling them what's out there. I'm asking questions of them for them to understand that investing whatever the amount is sensible. We know if your audience can understand people do things on emotions, yet you want to get them consciously to a place where they can see it's sensible and logical. That's the what I call that winning, whether you want to call it formula or whatever word your audience wants to internalize on that.
That's so good. I mean, it's so much, and this is why we do reverberate. It's so much about the reframe. I've never used those words, but what I find over and over is giving people a moment of pause, of flipping their shoes around and seeing it from a different perspective. Right? It's like I've resolved so many challenging situations for people and with people by just giving them a moment of, okay, let me, somebody who is contesting something, like if I were your client and this happened, right? They only see it from their frame of point of view. And when you get them seeing it from a different point of view, and that's really, I think, a lot of what success in life is. So many people, Jamie, they're functioning on perception. Perception is faulty at best, but when you can create perspective for people, when you seek perspective and provide perspective, then all of a sudden it's like, wow, they have a moment, a light bulb that comes off, and they connect their emotional experience with something that now feels logical. And those two come together, and then you have a piece of dynamite in that moment.
I'll go one step further. All right. And again, like I love when I get the praise of from a people who watch me talk, Jamie, like I can go and implement this like right away. All right. So this the perception, usually most people in their communication, they say this word a lot. And you'll never hear me say it unless I'm teaching people not to say it. They say what they want. Like so they'll say, I want. Or I would like so it'd be like me saying, Neil, I would like the opportunity to sit down with you next week. Well, just saying the words I want or I would like, is there any emphasis on the other person?
Oh
There
my
isn't.
God.
And
No.
I will prove to you that no one cares. If you're talking to a complete stranger, I can prove to you in 2 seconds they don't care. Here's why. My daughter, when she was 8, said, Dad, I want a cell phone. That's my own daughter, who I would give anything in the world to. She's saying to me, I want a cell phone. And I said, No, Ruby, your brother didn't get one till he was 12. All right. She's saying, I want. If I don't care what my own daughter wants, what chance do we have complete strangers? So here's the difference. More conscious communication, the caliber of questions that can go into the real world is this. What if my daughter was more conscious and she goes, Dad, do you care about my safety? As a starting point, what she's doing is she's focused her attention on me. She's making it
Yeah.
about me first. So I hope that your audience walks away and understands, hold a minute, I can see I need to interject more questions like that rather than I want. Can I make it about the other person? And that's in their emails, on a phone call, cold calling. They're saying something that is just irrelevant to the other person, and they're hearing it from everyone in the world.
And it's so interesting because people will say, "Well, I don't think a mindset shift is going to help me. I just need a system. I need a plan. I need a script." When the main mindset shift for everybody in business, and I hope people are listening to the brilliance that Jamie's saying here, because not even subtextually, what he's telling you is that your focus on you and your need for thinking that you matter is getting in the way of you serving more people. And I used to coach transformational workshops. They were 2 5-day intense workshops. And one of the biggest breakthroughs we would have is we called it the I matter exercise. And we would keep asking people with very intense music, and they had a partner, they were in a dyad, they keep asking, what matters, and they would be like saying all these things, and they'd be snotting and crying, and then they would have a breakthrough, and they're like, I matter. And what I used to tell people is that when you finally matter, it doesn't matter, then nobody's in your way, and it doesn't matter anymore, right? But when we're all walking around with only I matter, which is how people are functioning in society, how the hell are you going to sell to somebody from enroll somebody rather? Not, I don't like the word sales. Enroll somebody from that place of scarcity.
It's interesting. You just said something very, very. Look, I don't. If something's cliche, it usually ends up becoming factual. I call my course conscious communication. Why? I've never really run into too many people who like the word sales. All right, they don't. And you know what's interesting? You will hear people saying these things to you. And what people are hearing and what people are saying are two different things. So if my biggest client to date came on board as a result of someone knocking on my front door, and the first words out of their mouth is, I'm not here to sell you something. If your audience, anyone in the audience listening, ever goes up to another individual and says, I'm not here to sell you something, the other person is hearing you say, You're here to sell me something. If someone says, I don't like the word sales, or I don't consider myself a salesperson, what the other person is hearing is, You're about to try and sell me something, and you think you're bad at it. All right, that's what people are hearing. You are
Mm-hmm.
better off. You are better off, your audience, hopefully they love this, telling the person, I am here to win your business. Hey, or they could do elevate with if you were me. Hey, if you were me and you knew you could help someone, all right, would you be wanting to win that person's business. The other person says yes. You've not said I want. You're like, if you were in my shoes, would you be wanting to help? And as long as the person's nodding their head like you are, if I could cheekily say, hey, Neo, when you invite me along here, if you were me, you're a guest on someone's podcast, right? Would you be wanting to make a positive impact on everyone who listens into this and teach them things? Yes. I have no need to say the words I want, what I want. I can just put the audience into my shoes. Then everything else becomes natural.
Yeah, beautiful point, and helping people just feel the gravity of that, like how simple and easy it can be to get ourselves out of the way, and how often we are in the way. So, one of the things I think we would be remiss in not talking about when we're talking about this conscious communication, what are in your books a couple of the big pitfalls that people fall into when it comes to communicating? I think often for me, what I heard you say too is that safety is really important. This is a thing that I talk about that people don't get quite, but it's like what I really hear you saying is like, how do we create transparency and safety? Like letting people know kind of what's going to happen while you're talking to this person, right? I hear that deeply in your message, but what are a couple other nuggets that you share from
Okay,
stage?
so you said the pitfalls I see. Here are two of the pitfalls. One is definitely oversharing. A lot of people overshare. You've heard me on stages, and you'll see I don't share anything about myself. I make my first two things out my mouth when I give a talk are questions of the audience, and then I make it a lesson. Like, do you have to know anything about me, or do you have faith in Jim or whoever invites me? All right. And then the idea is most people say, no, we've all got faith in Jim. Okay, great. I'm going to make this a lesson for everyone. How many speakers have you seen out there in your time going to events where 15, 20 minutes they're talking all about themselves? And why? And the audience is like looking at their watches, being like, when are we going to actually learn something? We get it. You know this. All right. So, but that's everyone in every industry. They want to talk about themselves, or they work for a company that thinks their history is so important that a potential client has to know everything. And they talk for 15, 20 minutes about that. Well, I didn't invent this concept, but you can talk yourself out of a sale. If you're starting by the first 15 minutes, you're talking about yourself and the business, you are making the other person in front of you irrelevant, where you should be, as you've been saying, we should be irrelevant in that interaction. So that's the first pitfall. The second pitfall that I find is people are scripted. If someone is starting, people are spending hours a day, doing this activity. Hi, I'm so and so with so and so when they get them on the phone. Most people, if I ask you, what do we want to do when someone starts their call with the words, hi, I'm so and so with so and so? We want to hang up. So there are better methods where my clients tell me, Jamie, I didn't get hung up on. All right. And they know to keep the call short. It's not about script. It's how quick can I give the impression this call's going to be? And it's selling the right thing at the right time. Most people fall into the overshare of too much information in an email, or overshare of too many discovery questions on a phone call. An email should only be selling, can I get someone on the phone? A phone call should be, can I get someone to meet me in person? When I give a talk, there's two things I'm selling. You're either going to text me, or you're actually going to approach me in person and hand me your credit card. I am not selling, this is my package, this is what everyone gets. I'm not saying, click on this QR code. The cell phone, I had Tiffany Napper come up to me in Nashville and say, Jamie, I'm totally stealing the cell phone. Why? If you're speaking on stage, or your audience is looking to have a speak on the stage, you want to sell them on the warmest form of correspondence you possibly can. Last time I checked, if someone texts you, you've got a red one in your phone, it now elevates it very easy to either get them on a phone call or a meeting. And it's understanding the psychology of things like that. There are more pitfalls. You asked for a couple. Those are two definitely big ones. It's oversharing and starting out scripted where everyone's been and done it. Right? Everyone has their permission. No one needs a British accent. You don't need to say word for word the words that I said either. All right, you can come up with your. It's having a predictable outcome. It's going into a conversation with these words solidified in your head. I agree with you. If every interaction you go into with someone, with the words "I agree with you," you're going to ask questions that are going to naturally get that conversation in that direction. And you don't want everyone as a client. You want the right people who think the right way around something.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. I love this line of logic of just allowing the business to come to you rather than chasing it. And I think that's where people kind of misconstrue this. We're not saying that you sit in a room in a meditative position, which is a good thing to do, by the way, and just say that business will come into my life. What we're saying is that you don't come to the call from a place of complete agenda, scarcity, and sort of a bolt hole clinch that you need this person. Maybe you need them, maybe you don't.
It's
That's
not.
right.
I don't play the numbers game. Yeah. A lot of it. Here's what I play. How quality of a conversation can I have at the time I'm actually having the conversation with the person? So when I go to bed at night, before I go to bed and I look in the mirror and I'm brushing my teeth, I can be like, did I give my very best? When I'm on this podcast, it's like, did I give Neo my best? Was I a great? And it's coming on here with this. I'm not actually a reflection on me. In my opinion, no guest you have on here is a reflection on themselves. We're a reflection on you. All right. And the more like I can have where people are like, Neo, thank you so much for inviting Jamie along, the more winning, the less chasing that anybody has to do. And it's understanding that notion. It's like a restaurant you go to. The biggest compliment you can give is you go back to it. All right. A lot of my talks end up becoming residual and annual for me. And it's because you leave people feeling a certain way. And that's also nice. I think if everyone realized people remember the way you leave them feeling, they wouldn't try and be so scripted. They just
Yeah,
try and find out another better way so that people don't feel that way.
yeah, and that's why I really emphasize to people all the time is like your messaging, the way you speak, even in an enrollment conversation, it should be 80% transformational and 20% transactional because that's what people want at the end of the day. I used to be in boardrooms all across the nation once upon a time, and all these executives and coats would talk about rubrics and SWOT analysis. But you know what 2/3 of the fucking meeting was about? How's the customer going to feel? How's the marketing going to feel? How are we going to get them from even kill to growth mode or trouble mode? It was all feeling, feeling, feeling. And so that, one of the things I think I'm hearing deeply in your message is like, when you can have a better relationship with yourself and your messaging, with your own internal marketing and owning that in a way, it becomes a much, much easier.
I love that you emphasize on this, and the goal is to make sure this message comes across with responsibility. I You use the word transactional. Everything initially with a client can have a sense of some transactional because they are paying you. I will not apologize for how I make a living to go on the vacations or provide the best for myself, my girlfriend, her kids, my kids. That's not going to come with apology because in yourself, you believe in yourself and what you bring to another human being. However, I get told a lot I don't do things that make any business sense. And maybe your audience as entrepreneurs can take this as a lesson. Everything I do in life, I post on just Facebook. I took the lesson from Tiffany Napa, Find Your Fork from Nashville Talk. And so I only really post anything on my Facebook. I have a theory behind that, and I won't go into detail on that. However, if people want to see the validity, the receipts, as they call it, all right, of what I'm about to share, I took a client of mine, all right, who invested 6 grand in me a few years back. This year in February, I took him to Milan, Italy. All right. And I paid for first class plane tickets for him. I got him his own suite at the hotel. I didn't let him stick his hand in his pocket for any meals or anything. And I took him to the San Siro to watch a game of AC Milan playing at San Siro, which happened to be a bucket list item for me. You can have conversations. A lot of people in different arenas give people the same gift without realizing, hold on a minute, if they just listened, they would be able to give people gifts that actually matter. All right. And I listened to Christian and he's like, I love soccer. I love the idea of going and watching a soccer game. I'm like, tell you what, he's invested 6 grand in me. I invested 8 grand in him. All right. And I invested 8 grand. So I spent 16 grand. So the responsibility part is this. I'm Do not go and spend money you don't have irresponsibly. I'm not going to share that. However, the notion I've coined is what's called healthy obligation. When you do for somebody else something that you don't have to do in their mind, when you do something for somebody else when you don't have to do it in their mind, they're going to feel a healthy sense of obligation to give you back. All right. And so if people can understand, it's actually one of the wisest business moves on the planet to do. And you get to enjoy your life. It's not a, I get to enjoy the first class flight too, and all the good food and the hotel and the game. Life is glory. It doesn't have to be this programmed. You've got to do this all day, every day. You can, I've got financial advisors who are now joined golf clubs, and they've made more from bringing on clients at the golf club they joined than they
Of course.
do. You're saying, of course, but people don't think, that whole notion common sense isn't common, Neo.
Yes.
I guess where I'm going with this is maybe people who are on here be like, they might understand they've got a hobby they enjoy and they can find their clients doing their hobby, right? Rather than having a boss say, you just need to make 100 calls, because that's the only way the boss knows that they're going to get three people and play a numbers game. That doesn't have to go that way. I guess is
I,
hopefully
I,
that
I
hits home.
I love this, and this is a good point to wrap up here as we close things out. But it's like it's so much for me and my ideas of wealth is that people talk about hustle, and hustle isn't arrival; it's alignment and then action, and repeat cycles of alignment, action elevate you into being a more intuitive entrepreneur and more intuitive on human being, right? And just to wrap this point up, this brilliant point. I hope you guys are really listening to what Jamie is saying here. It doesn't have to be a trip to Milan. It can be as simple as sending your client a bracelet with their word on it, taking them to a meal. I'm doing a mastermind retreat here in Indianapolis, and you can be sure I've got some goodie bags and stuff that's going to blow their socks off. They're not going to know what happened to them, and I am going to go over budget, but I don't care. I want them to leaving that place with this guy cares more about me and took time to think about something individual for me than any other person has, right? And so I know that whether it'll pay off there or it'll pay off somewhere down the street, it's going to pay off because caring more has a huge payoff. So Jamie, how can people, if they want to understand more conscious communication, want to be a wizard of communication in their own lives, how can they find you?
Right. So, practicing what I just preached earlier, if you have a guest or someone who's listening in that wants to be a guest of yours, if I'm doing a podcast, all right, if I send them to a website, that's one action. That then they have to look at my cell phone number, two actions, all right, and then I'm just going to leave my cell phone number, Neo. We're not the people who are going to listen into this. There's only one time I've given my cell phone number where it was, and I've got a sense of humor, so I found it funny. I gave a talk at a brewery, not in Nashville, all right, in North Carolina, and it was like I didn't realize we were in a section, but people in the actual by the bar could all who weren't there for my talk could also see the screen. So I started getting some random text messages from funny people in there. With your podcast, that's not going to happen. When you're giving a talk at a regular event, that's not going to happen. So for me, the serious people who listen in where they're like, I think this guy Jamie is onto something, and they believe that I can help them, they can just reach out to my cell phone and I can say it here, and I guess you can write it in some chat or something. But it's 407 And I'm not even going to repeat. The posture is I've said it once. If they need to play it back, they can. All right. I believe in abundance. It's giving people advice with no attachment to the outcome. And that that might be for another day, in the future. But if people can do things in their life because they want to do them with no expectation, and they're just being them glorious selves, that leads to peace, which we were talking at the beginning. This is the happy scenario. If someone said, "What's the most important word to you?" For me, it's peace. All right,
Yes,
and
without a doubt.
hopefully that can align with your listeners.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, Jamie, it's always a spiritual experience hanging out with you. I'm glad we got to know each other, hang out at dinners and so forth. I see more in our future. And I just want to thank you for being on the show. And for you guys who are listening to this podcast, reach out to Jamie. He is the real deal. I can tell you that firsthand knowledge. And as always, guys, remember that the best part of being wealthy is being happy.